Good afternoon. Now, most athletes, when they retire, either carry on in some managerial capacity, become trainers, or quietly get out of the sport altogether. Not so, I should say, Divina Galicia, the captain of our, former captain, I should say, of our British women's Olympic ski team, because she's just announced that she's going to take up, of all things, motor racing. Divina, the welcome and the obvious first question, why?
Well, I retired from ski racing 3 years ago, and since then I've run a little shop by myself, and I suddenly got bored of sitting down doing nothing, and I'm very competitive, and I just wanted to get back into some sort of competitive sport. And motor racing said, well, here we are, why don't you give us a go? And I said, great, this is marvellous.
How did you get involved? I mean, have you actually done any training, as it were?
Yes, I've done quite a bit of training. I got involved, I entered a charity race, and I came second to Che Blythe, and everyone there said, look, you seem to drive quite fast, why don't you take it up? So with the help of MCD, I had some lessons at Brands Hatch, and that just expanded into this.
Do you find any similarity in the skills that are required for motor racing and for skiing down the slopes?
Oh yes, it's very similar. When I was racing, ski racing, I was a downhill specialist, and that meant you went straight down the mountain. But to get down the mountain the fastest, you had to be terribly careful that you took the speed on the straight into the corners and then came out of the corners fast again. And it's just the same thing in motor racing. To win a race, you've got to be the fastest on the corners.
How involved are you going to be? I mean, are you really going to be competing in all the big races?
Well, this year I'm competing in super saloon and special saloon races in a car which is capable of doing about 150 miles an hour. I don't know if it really rather depends how well I do this year, what I do next year, whether I go for a bigger car or whether I stay in the same thing.
Doesn't the danger bother you? Because, I mean, although you say it's only a 150 mile an hour car, and there are faster ones than that, it's still pretty hairy, isn't it?
Well, it's quite frightening when there are a lot of people around you and you go from the start to the first corner in a sort of jam pack. But once you can shake them off, it's not too frightening. And you really just have to keep your wits about you. It isn't frightening, it's exhilarating, really.
Do you know much about cars? I mean, have you had to learn all about the engines and the mechanics of the things?
I've had to learn quite a bit, actually. I do know little because I drove a Mini for many years, and you have to be a mechanic to drive a Mini. But I've had to learn a lot more about engines because the engines in the cars that I'm going to drive are really quite technical.
What do the boyfriends think about it?
I think they're all madly jealous.
Can you earn a lot of money? I mean, could you, if you were successful in the coming months, could you earn a lot of money doing this?
Not this year. I don't think I can earn any money at all this year because the type of class of car I'm in isn't money earning. But if I went into, say, Formula 5000, then you can earn quite a lot of money.
What about that? I mean, do you fancy becoming a single-seat motor racing driver?
Well, I'd love to, but it really depends how well I am in this before I can take the step ahead.
What sort of extra skills and training would you require for that, do you know?
It's not extra skills, it's whether a company think that you're good enough to back. And I have to prove that I'm good enough this year for somebody to decide that I will be good enough to back for next year.
You would, of course, be competing against men in all these events, wouldn't you?
Yes, almost entirely. There's one other girl, Layla Lombardi, who races now Formula 1, who competes in the races, but mainly men I shall be competing against.
How do they feel about that? Have you spoken to any motor racing drivers about another lady among their ranks?
No, I haven't, but I rather visualise everything that happens will be blamed on me. I mean, if there's a big pile-up, it'll be my fault. That mad girl, you know, it's all her fault. But I don't mind that, really. I expect it, I suppose.
You always drive, I gather, in car number 13. Why is that?
13's my lucky number. I was born on the 13th, and my 21st birthday was on Friday the 13th, so it's always been lucky for me.
Well, let's hope it stays lucky for you. Thank you very, very much indeed, and all the very best in the coming months, and hope you stay in one piece.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.